Hello everyone, welcome to this overview of Blendspill, which is this gizmo right here, designed to blend the edges between a despill plate and a background when you're working on a chroma key shot. I'm going to show you what the gizmo is supposed to do, and I'm going to show you what the different controls are. I've got this amazing footage right here that Matt from VFXforFilmmakers.com provided to the community for free years ago on a keying tutorial he made. So thanks a lot, Matt, for that. And go and check his YouTube channel, VFX for Filmmakers. He has a million tutorials, interviews, all kinds of stuff related to VFX. So thanks again, Matt, for the footage. Now, let's imagine that we are at a point in our keying process where we have our despill footage with an alpha that we pulled and copied. And I'm using AP despill here, so thanks Adrian Puello for AP despill. It's great. It's my favorite. I recommend it. And we do the usual, right? We pre-multiply it and we merge it. And when we do this, what usually happens almost every time is that we're going to have these edges, sometimes more, sometimes less. I'd say the bigger the difference between the neutralized screen and the background, the more noticeable your edges are going to be. And that is because basically what you have here is semi-transparent values that get blended with this gray screen, and you end up having a color sandwich between the foreground, the screen, and the background. So you look at those edges and you start thinking, maybe I'm doing something wrong and I have to erode my alpha or something. No, your alpha is probably fine. The problem is in the despill, and that is when you find out that getting rid of these edges is actually the time-consuming part of doing a chroma key shot. And everyone has their own technique of getting rid of this. Edge push, edge extend, painting them by hand, tinting them, or a combination of all of those. And Blendspill is just another one of those techniques. However, it is designed to be as non-destructive as possible. It's not going to be actually changing the pixel structure, but it's going to be using the spill information and replacing that spill information with the background information. So it will be like a despill to color kind of thing. And I'm going to show you how it works. Let me get rid of these things. So let's take a look at Blendspill and what it does. Let me show you what the gizmo looks like. So you have three inputs and a mask input. You have your background. That's easy. That's your comp background, of course. So I'm going to connect that. And then you have your foreground, and what Blendspill expects by foreground is exactly this, a despill plate with an alpha in the alpha channel. So I'm going to connect that. And then the third one is the most strange kind of input, which is the spill information. And what is the spill information? Well, it's basically the difference between the plate despilled and before the despill. And it's very easy to obtain. So you basically do a from operation using your plate before despill as B and your despill plate as A. You do from, and this green contamination is exactly what Blendspill is going to use to turn those spill values into the background, basically. So I'm going to connect that and I'm going to show you what the result is, right? Let me go ahead and do a merge, and I'm gonna do a pre-mult here. And as you can see, if I use the mix, this is before Blendspill, after Blendspill, right? So you can see that the gizmo is getting rid of all of these edges that were basically problematic, but it's not actually extending or anything. It is basically, as I told you, a spill to color where it is turning those neutral gray values into the color of the background. Now, let me get rid of this and let's start with a fresh Blendspill. Here we go. Okay, so we connect the background, the foreground, and the spill information. And this is what we have by default. And I'm going to show you what the knobs do one by one. And I'm going to show you what the usual process is. But remember, Blendspill is designed to be used as an edge treatment. If you can avoid using it for the whole image, that's better. And what do I mean by that? I mean, for example, you have an erode and you have your alpha, or you have an edge mask already or something. I erode it, I blur it a little bit, a little bit of this, and then I use my mask input, and then I only apply edge Blendspill in the edges, right? So if you can use it like this or something like that, that would be better. But anyways, let's go back and let's show you what the process is supposed to look like. So the first knob that you have to look at is the spill type. That would be because if this is wrong, Blendspill is not going to work. Now, if you have your spill information, the RGB spill is what you want to use. And every knob has a description. So you can take a look at the description if you don't know what the knob does, but I'm going to explain it anyways. But other times you have your spill information in the alpha. For example, if you're using APD spill, you're going to see that by default, let's do this, it has output spill mat in alpha, right? So you have this, if you have this is also the spill information. So you can use that also, right? You can do that and change that to alpha, and it's going to be the same thing. Now, I prefer to do it manually for other reasons, but let's go back to that. So that is the first one. And the next one is the respill balance. That is the most important one. And let me show you why. When I take a look at this already looks quite good. Let me pre-multiply this and let's go and look at the merge. And, these edges, they're working, they're much better. They work, this works too, everything is kind of working. But this area right here is not looking right. And why is that? Let me turn off fill inside. And if I turn off fill inside, you're gonna see that we are, a lot of this background detail is coming through, and this looks semi-transparent, not opaque enough. And why is that happening? The reason why, if you remember, I told you that Blendspill is using the spill information and turning that spill information into the background information. If we take a look at the spill information, you're going to see that we have green everywhere. It's not only on the edges. The green is contaminating also the face and other places too. And in all of those places where the green is contaminating the footage, Blendspill is going to bring the background in. So that is why we have all of this background detail coming through. Now, a great way of solving this is using the fill inside, which basically blurs the background using the alpha. So you can avoid having detail, which is ultimately what you notice when you look at this. You don't notice that much the difference in color value, but you do notice the detail. But the thing is that you actually should avoid having as much as possible these transparent areas. Don't rely on the fill inside to fix everything. It's not going to do that. The way you solve this, and that is why I say that the first knob that you should tweak is respill balance. Respill balance is the most important knob in the whole Gizmo. Everything else is there to fix technical problems, but respill balance is actually the one where you choose how much respill you want. And if I go 0.9, for example, you're going to see that I basically fixed my problem. Now, this is not transparent anymore, the edges are working and all of that, but I created a new problem, which is that I brought back these values that were actually working before. So the reason for that is that you want oftentimes the respill balance to work differently depending on how bright the background is. And that is why the balance mask exists, which is basically a Luma key where I take a look and I decide what values are going to be affected by the respill balance. And then I have an inverse balance, which is going to affect the values that are, in this case, part of the black area of the mask, right? So if I do that, and I take a look at this, once I activate my balance mask, you're going to see that I'm only affecting the areas that are on top of the sky, which is exactly what I want. And that is why this works relatively well. And now that I kind of fixed it, yes, now I can use the fill inside to fix these kind of problems where the edge is transparent, right? I do this and I fixed it, but I'm not using it to fix everything. I'm using it to fix just these tiny details that are coming through at the end of the process. So once I have this, well, I'm quite happy with the result. This is actually kind of working already. And if I go to another frame, let's go to this frame, for example, that has a lot of motion blur. If I do this, you can see that the Gizmo is working quite well. It's blending, blending all the edges. It's working. I don't have this problem with the values. And the best part about this is that I'm not extending the edges or anything, and I'm keeping all the detail that is actually in the original plate. So that is the great thing about it. Of course, nothing is perfect, nothing is automatic, and you might have to do it to fix things manually, paint it, extend an area. But again, this is helping me a lot in this shot. Now, let me go and let me look at the other knobs and let me tell you what they do. And remember, I told you they're mostly to fix technical issues. And you also have an info tab here that has troubleshooting and setup and all of that. But okay, let's go back and let me take a closer look at a couple of details that we might fix with these other knobs. Let me take a look at this area right here. And if I crank up the gamma, you're going to notice that I have a lot of dark values here. And these dark values, if I take a look at the original footage, they weren't that dark. So what's going on right here? I mean, the background is not black and the original footage was not that dark. So, well, if you have an output that is super contrasty or has problems like this, that is where the gamma knob comes up. And this is basically like having a log checkbox, but manually and using a gamma, which I found gave me better results. And if I crank up the gamma, you're going to see that I fixed this problem. Now, these dark edges are gone and I have a much better result. But cranking up the gamma could bring some other issues. Let me go back to this frame that has a lot of motion blur and take a look at this. With gamma 1, this was working really nice, but with gamma 3, now these edges are flat and they don't match up with this, and it's not working as well. At least not on this shot. Every shot is going to be different. And that is where the contrast knob comes in. The contrast knob is a good way of bringing back those contrast values, that saturation, all of that you lost when you gamma up without sacrificing the fix that you made here. So if I go back to this and I go contrast up, I don't know, to 4, now I fixed this problem right here. I don't have this flat and desaturated edges anymore. And if I go back to the first frame, again, this problem is fixed too. So 3 and 4 could be a good value for this shot, but again, every shot is going to be different. Let's move on. I already told you what fill inside does. It doesn't need much explanation, I think. It blurs the footage, the background using the alpha, and if you are experiencing a lot of variation from frame to frame with things that could happen, like for example here, right? So you have everything is bright here and now everything is dark. You can mitigate that issue by, cranking the smoothness up or eroding or feather, all of that is pretty intuitive. But let me show you where eroding might help. If I go to this frame, maybe the fill inside is blurring too close to the edge and I'm losing detail right here that should be more semi-transparent. That is where eroding might actually help. And you can animate this, right? So this might be helpful, and again, use this however you want. So again, let's move on to this trio right here. Okay, so let's look at this edge. Can you notice how we have orange here, and then we have a dark edge here, and then it blends with the background here, but it's kind of a brighter edge here. Why is that happening? Okay, again, this is happening because of the spill information. If we take a look at the spill information, what we're going to see is that the spill information is blurrier than the despilled plate. And that difference could be because of chromatic aberration, could be because of blown out, because the screen is too bright, whatever. But that difference in values is going to create and can create these artifacts. And if your despill information is, your spill information is blurrier, you can use the spill sharpen. And if I go, I don't know, to 5, you can see how I'm helping fix this problem. But again, it's not going to be perfect. And Blendspill is designed to keep the pixel structure and to not actually modify anything, it's not edge blurring, edge extending, all of those things. So you might have to do those things afterwards in some areas if you want. And I can add an edge blur here, and it can maybe help with this, but it's not going to be inside the Blendspill, right? You have to do it before or after the fact. But sharpening this might help with that issue. So I'm going to do that. And blurring is the same thing, but the opposite. If you have a spill information that is noisy, grainy, sharp, or has artifacts or something, blurring it might help. But it's not an edge blur. If you blur it and your spill information was actually fine, you're going to create artifacts like this, right? So it's not because of that. It's to solve a technical issue. It's not an edge blur. If you want an edge blur, do it afterwards. Okay. And what is the spill bias? Well, it's quite difficult to see how useful it is in this shot in particular. But if I crank it up, you're going to see that it's kind of chewing a little bit on the edges, on the spill, whatever. So let's say you have a very small screen area and it's mostly covered by semi-transparent things like some people walking in front of it, motion blur, whatever. It might cause artifacts or problems. And if you feel like not enough background is getting through, modifying the spill bias might help with that. Now, all of the rest of the knobs, respill balance, inverse balance, the balance mask, and all this, which is to create the Luma mask. I already told you what they're for, but let's take a look at this. The pre-multiply node, I have to do a disclaimer right here, is not actually a pre-multiply node. It is called pre-multiply because we all know what pre-multiply means, but it is not actually the same, let me show you what I mean, as doing this. And the reason why is because if we take a look at this image, the edges are already blended. So if I do a pre-mold, it will be like doing a double pre-mold. And when I merge it on top of the background, I'm going to be actually losing detail, right? Take a look. So this is kind of a from operation actually, and if I use that, I'm actually kind of preserving all of the detail. It's giving me the same result as the unpromoted Blendspill. So this is why I think this works better, but it can also have some problems, especially with dark values where you can have negative values like I have right here. And this is why the black clamp exists, to mitigate those issues, but it can actually modify the end result. And that is why I decided to not clamp it by default, to give you the option if you want to clamp it. And oftentimes having these negative values are not going to be a problem, but again, if you want to be clean, if you want to be perfect, not having negative values is usually better, and it might cause artifacts. If I use, I don't know, let's say that I want to use an edge extend after the fact. If I do an edge extend, look at this. I'm going to see all of these artifacts that I have. If I do a black clamp, I'm going to get rid of those. So that is what the black clamp is there. Okay. And same for the white clamp, right? So I'm going to do that. And with this, I'm finished with the part where I tell you what the different controls are. But let me tell you why Blendspill is great, in my opinion. Let's say that I receive a note and now the foreground has to be brighter, right? And I have to change the luminance of the character, or I have to do it, cooler, right? Or warmer. And let me say it's going to be cooler. The great thing about Blendspill is that it can actually withstand those changes, and it doesn't matter if now it's have to be brighter, darker. I may have to change some values in the node, but it's going to work. And not only it's going to work if the foreground changes, it is actually going to work too if the background changes. So let's say the background moves, which is something that happens a lot. They say, no, I want it like this. Well, Blendspill is gonna work too, like that. Yeah, it's gonna work. Now the background is darker. It's gonna work. The background is brighter again. Let's see what happens if we go cooler, warmer. We can change the colors of the background, and it's overall gonna still work. It's not going to be perfect maybe, and I may have to tweak some things, but overall, I think it is withstanding these changes quite well. Another thing that works great that you can see, that you can also see, and it might help you in some shots, you can also see in this example, is that because it's kind of spilling into the character, sometimes it might help you integrate better the plates, because it is actually kind of spilling and lighting the character with the color of the background. And other times it's a problem, but in this case I think it works. And it doesn't matter if now this beard is against the sky and now it's against this dark bush, it's gonna work. And that robustness is why I fell in love with this technique, because beforehand when I was doing it manually, it would take me hours to match this specific foreground to that specific background, and then if something changed, it would take me hours again to fix it. And now if I'm lucky, it's going to be just a couple of minutes. So that is probably my favorite thing about this technique. Okay, so I just want to mention one more thing before I finish, and that is that in this info tab, it says, don't restore the screen luminance in areas you want to affect. And what do I mean by that? I'm talking about the despill here. And when you do your despill, you lose that, screen contamination, but also you lose the luminance that screen contamination represented. And a lot of gizmos have this ability, including AP despill, of restoring that luminance. But the problem with that is that if you do that and then you obtain your spill information from a plate where you restore your luminance, Blendspill is not going to be able of replacing that with the background information, and you're going to end up with something like this. And this is not actually a problem because I could have fixed this, but it's more a feature, because the thing is you actually and usually don't have just one despill a lot of times. You have a core despill and an edge despill. Let me show you what I mean by that. So if I have my edge despill right here and my core despill right here, and for the core despill, I am going to restore the luminance, and then I key mix the two of them. Let's say I do any road and like this, and then blur it, and now I do this. Here I have a plate where I restore my screen luminance on the inside, right? Not on the edges, but on the inside. And now, if I get my spill information from that, now the core is black, which is exactly what I want, right? It's not actually black, but it is darker for sure. And let's say it's black because when Blendspill is gonna use that screen luminance, it's gonna ignore all of those places where you restore the luminance. So now, if you remember, if I go back to default values, you're gonna remember that before I had something like this, but now I have two despills, a core despill and an edge despill. Now it is ignoring all of those places where I did restore the luminance. So ideally, if you have an edge and a core despill that is well done, Blendspill is going to use that and it's going to actually ignore the places that it should ignore. So that is a feature that, well, that it works. However, the reason why I wanted to mention it specifically is because if you do find this kind of problem where, so let's say if I create an AP despill and by default it is restoring the luminance. So I create an AP despill and I do this, and then I go to Blendspill and it's broken. That is why it's broken, because you are restoring the screen luminance. And as a conclusion, I'd say that I wanted to share this tool because I haven't found anything quite like it, at least not publicly available online on Wikipedia or whatever. I always thought there must be some in-house tool that does this, but we're talking about in-house tools here, so I never found it. I guess the closest thing would be if you're using AP despill on its absolute mode, which is like an image-based keyer. That's amazing. I discovered that not long ago, actually. And the big inspiration for this gizmo is a part in Tony Lyon's keying template, if you know what I'm talking about. He uses the spill information and the background to blend the edges. And when I saw that, that is what I started. And I said, oh, I want to make my own version of this, but a more straightforward version in a gizmo instead of a template. So if you know of a gizmo, of a tool that does the same thing, I'd love to hear about it. And if not, here is my own version of it. It's not perfect, of course, but it does work for me, so hopefully it works for you too. Bye!